Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Grajdek. I'm Dr. Martha Grajdek. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Layoffs are an unfortunate part of reality when it comes to the workplace. Layoffs can affect any industry, any part of the world, any profession. Layoffs come with a harsh reality of many types and many levels. And after the employees are gone, business as usual needs to continue in some way. Unfortunately, those who are left, those who continue to be employed, have to find a way of functioning and continuing business as usual as much as they can without the previous help of those individuals who are no longer there. It's not difficult to see that layoffs don't end when the people exit, when those who got laid off are gone, but rather layoffs then continue or begin for those who are left. Layoff aftermath includes things such as survivor syndrome, specifically the way that those who are left have to deal with what happened. Layoffs often affect the company's culture. There may be cultural shifts, sometimes hidden, sometimes obvious. The bottom line is that layoffs can be quite disruptive and very much heavily felt or experienced by both those who were let go and those who remain behind. Let's look at survivor syndrome. This phrase pertains to those individuals, those employees who continue to be employed by the company or the organization. Watching someone else lose their job can be traumatic in its own way. It may come with feelings of grief, feeling bad or feeling sorry for those who just lost their jobs. It may also include a sense of guilt for having been spared. Even though on one hand, a person may be glad that they're still employed and they still have a means of income, there is that certain guilt for having that job or having that income when others no longer do. Layoffs can increase stress and anxiety, especially for those who are left behind. They may become mistrustful or hypervigilant. Often, it's as though they're waiting for the other shoe to fall. They're waiting for their own layoffs, their own demise within the company. After all, their norm has just been changed. Things were shaken up. One day, your colleagues have a job and a place within the organization, and the next day they're gone. Witnessing something like that definitely affects one's ability to feel comfortable, to trust, and to know that they have a stable and reliable place within the organization. Beyond all of that, layoffs can also affect the performance of those who are left behind. Despite of their best attempts, their best intentions of doing their job and doing it well, despite of perhaps a fear-driven motivation to do the best job possible so that they're not next on the list of who is laid off, performance can still suffer. Stress and anxiety have a way of interrupting people's ability to do their best. In addition to reduced productivity, productivity may become volatile and unpredictable, all related to the layoffs. People may choose not to take any risks, whether it's in the workplace or in their personal lives. They may reduce their own voice, trying to become as invisible as possible, as if that were a way of preventing their own demise within the company. People may choose to spend more time at the workplace than they would otherwise do because of the layoffs. This is simply a response to the fear and anxiety of what they just witnessed. But it may also be the result of trying to make up for the work that they can't seem to get done, when they can't focus, when they're distracted, when their productivity has suffered. Some may attempt to compensate for that by staying at work longer. As you can see, layoffs have an impact that affects not only those who lost their jobs, but also those who are left behind. And although layoffs are sometimes inevitable or may seem like a good idea, realistically, layoffs should be the last option for any organization. The stress that is associated with experiencing layoffs, or witnessing layoffs more specifically, can be made even worse, can be heightened by how those in management and leadership positions handle this move on the organization's part. Minimizing what happened or trying to convince everybody that it's back to business as usual can create even more stress and anxiety. Vague reassurances can be almost as detrimental as no reassurances whatsoever. Vagueness can create more distrust and uncertainty. Spreading the workload onto those who are left behind is often what happens when layoffs take place. This can be especially difficult for high performers or high achievers who tend to be the first go-tos when it comes to passing along the tasks and the responsibilities of those individuals who are no longer with the company. Management and leadership all too often seem to make these moves without giving it much thought. Let's talk about what leadership and management should do instead to make that transition an easier one for everyone. Let's start with the need for transparency and honesty. Management and leadership should never be vague or sneaky about layoffs, whether that's while it's happening or after it has already happened. Once layoffs have been executed, it's important for the organization to have a strategy and to include the employees so that they are in the know what the strategy is. How will the organization move forward after this big change, after this big shakeup? And I say big shakeup because even if to the organization this does not seem like a big shakeup, to those who work for the company, it will seem significant. It will seem like a big shakeup. So the organization needs to have a strategy in place, but it needs to also share that strategy. Let your employees know what will remain the same and what will change as a result of the layoffs so that everyone is on the same page. This helps to reduce guessing and speculation and instead creates open communication, transparency, and more reason to trust again. It's also important to reset responsibilities. An organization absolutely must have a plan before the layoffs happen in terms of what will happen to the responsibilities of those who will no longer be with the organization. Those plans must be made clear once layoffs happened. Those employees who remain with the company must know what is happening to the tasks, the responsibilities of those individuals who are now gone. The company should never hope that somebody picks up the slack. There must be a solid plan in place, one that is shared with employees after the layoffs have taken place. When layoffs happen, it's inevitable that a certain amount of psychological safety has been compromised. It's the organization's job to rebuild that. Allow people to have a voice and encourage them to speak up. Let people ask questions. Allow them to voice their concerns. This will help employees to feel like they still are part of the organization. Assure them the best that you can. This will all start to rebuild that certain psychological safety that will likely have been lost when the layoffs took place. Let's look at some team-level practices for post-layoff reorganization. As I already mentioned, there is a need for workload rebalancing. Every manager, every leader needs to make sure that this is one of the first priorities for his or her team. Along with that, we need to understand decision clarity. What has changed, if anything, in the decision-making practices after the layoffs have taken place? Managers should also aim for recreating a sense of stability on their team. Seek feedback from your team members. If you ask people, they will likely tell you what it is that they need in order to feel more stable and secure in their jobs. It's important to address this on a team level so that it feels more real and more personal to individuals. If this is addressed solely on the corporate level at the very top, it may feel vague by the time it reaches the proverbial trenches. This is why these team-level practices are so important. It's also important for individual employees to do some work after layoffs have taken place. First and foremost, you have to work on your guilt. If you're feeling a sense of guilt for having been spared, it's time to reframe it. This is when focusing on those things that are in your control versus not in your control is so important. It's also important to focus on the so-called controllables as you move forward. Despite your best efforts and despite the organization's efforts, the future is never 100% certain. Rather than focusing on a possible future disaster, focus on what you can control and let go of those things that simply stress you out more, the uncertainties, the unknowns. Pay attention to your boundaries as an individual employee, whether those are boundaries at the workplace, but also boundaries beyond the workplace. When something such as layoffs are experienced by individuals, it's all too easy for people to bring that stress along with them once they leave the workplace. Make it a priority to create strong boundaries between work and your non-work life so that what happens at work affects you as little as possible. Organizations will do well to have a plan in place before the layoffs even take place. A 30-day restabilization plan is an excellent place to start. Know your priorities. Have a clear strategy. Understand how to communicate with your employees and how often to update them on what's going on. Having a 30-day restabilization plan is critical because the first 30 days will likely be the most chaotic for employees. And while managers and those in leadership positions may also be shaken up or affected by the layoffs, by what happens, you mustn't forget your responsibility to the workforce as a whole. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Sometimes layoffs are inevitable, and when they happen, they affect not only those who lost their jobs, but also those who are left behind. Feelings of guilt and uncertainty may become overwhelming in the aftermath of layoffs. Survivor syndrome can be detrimental to one's experience at the workplace and beyond. It's up to the organization to have a strategy, to have a plan, even before the layoffs are executed. Being transparent and communicating with your employees is key. Having a plan and making it clear can go a long way. Focusing on things such as psychological safety and specifically rebuilding it is a must for the organization. Things such as workload rebalancing and proper boundaries will go a long way for both teams and individuals. And remember that a 30-day plan for restabilizing the workplace environment is an absolute must after layoffs. As the week unfolds, I encourage you to consider how layoffs could affect you and your organization, or how have they in the past done so. If you are in management and leadership position, there's much for you to consider. Layoffs are a big shakeup to your workforce. Even if they don't seem to be to the organization, make sure that as an organization you have a solid plan in place to deal with the aftermath of layoffs. And as an individual, especially if you are not in a management or a leadership position, you have to be able to separate yourself from any survivor guilt or any other feelings that will simply contribute to more stress in your workplace experience. Create healthy boundaries and focus on those things that you can control rather than ruminating on things that are out of your control and simply add more negativity into your experience. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of the podcast. Once you're there, check out some of the other videos. They focus on stress management. Stress Free with Dr. G is found on YouTube, and the link for that is in the description below. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.